In the 1980s, Jimmy Swaggart was one of the most popular preachers on television. Over the course of the decade, his weekly sermons were broadcast in all 50 states and dubbed into 15 languages for overseas broadcasts, making him one of the biggest in the business. But none of his sermons were more memorable than this one, his famous on-air apology in 1988.
Who has saved me and washed me and cleansed me? I have sinned against you, my Lord.
For many, it was a display of vulnerability and humility before God, a model for us all. For others, it was just a show.
You were shaking your head as you were watching those pictures of Jimmy Swaggart. What were you thinking?
It's just he's up there crying, and I know those tears aren't real.
How do you know?
This can't be. I mean, because he was up there preaching about all this stuff and then kind of doing it.
You see, unbeknownst to most of the time, the reason he was apologizing in the first place was because he had been caught at a hotel with this woman, Deborah Murphy, a prostitute. This after Swaggart had spent much of the year criticizing the sexual misconduct of two of his colleagues, Marvin Gorman and Jim Baker, both of whom were eventually defrocked by the Assemblies of God. 2 years later, Swaggart was caught once again, this time with a prostitute in a car. Rather than putting on a tearful show, he allegedly told the church, "The Lord told me it's flat none of your business." Sort of undercuts the first apology, if you ask me. As an outsider, it's difficult not to become cynical. When someone so clearly says one thing and does another, it's tempting to look at everything they've said over the years as a show, as manipulation, as simply hypocritical. For many, a hypocrite is someone who knows full well what they're doing, consciously aware of the fact that they are saying one thing with no intention of following through. We think of the two-faced politician, the opportunistic business person, the slimy religious leader that is evil to the core, using their public image to get what they want. And maybe those people exist. Maybe people like Jimmy Swaggart got into the ministry purely as a business move and never had any intention of living as a Christian. But I'm not so sure. Say what you want about the man, criticize his scandals and the scandals of the whole lot of them. But this is not a man just putting on a show. This is not a man who lacks conviction. He got into the ministry because he truly believes what he's preaching. Fallen, yes, but consciously two-faced? I don't think so. When we look at the notorious hypocrites of the religious world, people like Jimmy Swaggart, Theodore McCarrick, Jean Vanier, David Haas, the Pharisees, what we see are men who spent the vast majority of their time doing earnest work, building up the church, working for the sake of others. They committed horrible sins, and no one is discounting that. But I suspect that each one of them saw themselves, maybe even still sees themselves, as generally good people, doing genuinely good work with just a few flaws. And that right there is a fascinating insight. While sociopaths certainly exist, two-faced people that consciously and actively do what they know is evil in order to get what they want, I don't think that that's what's going on in most cases. In the vast majority of hypocrisy, in the Swaggarts and Vaniers of the world, what we see are people so blinded by their self-perception of goodness that the evil they do either doesn't seem that big of a deal or becomes completely justified. Social psychologists actually have a name for this phenomenon. It's called moral licensing, and it is one of the most fascinating, insightful bits of information that I've learned in a while. Basically, the presence of good behavior in a person serves as justification for immoral acts. The way it works is that when someone does something good, they become confident in their status as someone who is morally good. But instead of inspiring them to continue to do good, what often happens, ironically, is that they become so confident in that status that they start to see themselves as beyond reproach. Because they're a good person in their eyes, there isn't as much concern that an individual immoral action will hurt their standing with others, and so they overlook immoral actions as acceptable. In other words, those who think of themselves as good give themselves the benefit of the doubt, moral license to do what they want. Examples abound in our daily lives. It's going to the gym for a run and then eating 5 donuts. In any other situation, we know that eating 5 donuts is unhealthy and could never do it with a clean conscience. But having just been to the gym, having proven to ourselves that we are healthy people, that part of us that would normally feel guilty about going all Homer Simpson on fried dough covered with sugar goes quiet. I worked out, it's totally fine. Maybe even I deserve these donuts. In 2011, scientists in Taiwan found that people who took multivitamins were more likely to engage in unhealthy activities than those who didn't, smoking more cigarettes, engaging in riskier behavior, and choosing unhealthier foods. I took a vitamin. Clearly, I'm a healthy person, so these little bad things don't outweigh the good stuff I do. Studies have shown the same effect with energy usage. People who purchase high-efficiency appliances or replace conventional light bulbs with LEDs are more likely to use more energy than they did before. In their minds, they've earned a green status. They care for the earth, so they don't have to be as vigilant as they were before. It's this very idea that drives unconscious biases that lead to casual racism and sexism. If you've ever heard someone say, "I have lots of black friends," followed by something racist, this is what's going on. Having friends of another race gives the speaker credentials, proving in their eyes that they're not racist, that they're not a bad person, and so allowing them to say the racist thing or support this racist cause without challenging their good status. In each of these cases, something bad is being done by people, not because they're trying to manipulate others or because they want what is evil, but precisely because they see themselves as genuinely good. This is the essence of hypocrisy. This is how major leaders can stand in front of millions of people advocating for one thing and then do the exact opposite in their private lives. Moral licensing shows us that most people do not become hypocrites consciously and with an intent to manipulate those around them. They become hypocrites, ironically enough, because they started with good behavior. They start from a place of righteousness, of desiring to do good things, but their righteousness unconsciously dulls their vigilance and blinds them to the evil that they do. They don't even realize that they're hypocrites. In their eyes, based on the moral acts that they do, they're the good guys. And really, isn't that how we all kind of think? Generally speaking, don't we all see ourselves as good? Not perfect, not saints. Very few of us would ever use the word holy to describe ourselves, which is itself another issue. But I suspect that the vast majority of us do believe that the good we do outweighs the bad. An idea that we can see ever so slightly weakens our drive to do better. Thus, what makes you and me different from the colossal hypocrites of our age isn't so much that they're evil heathens distorted to the core and we're good normal people. It's simply a matter of scale and opportunity. While I'm not trying to suggest that we're all just the same and that anyone in their position would act immorally, I'm definitely not saying that. I do mean to point out that we can be guilty of the same thought process in our own lives. On a regular basis, we give ourselves license to do things we know aren't right. Plain and simple. Whether we're conscious of it or not, there are aspects of our lives that do not bother us, less than perfect decisions that do not keep us up at night. Why? Because there's something in our mind that tells us that we're a good person, so don't worry about it. That is dangerous. In matters of food and drink, it may not ultimately amount to anything significant, but you can see how an attitude like that can wreak havoc on the soul. You can see how the devil is positively at work here, that good deeds are used to weaken our conscience and make us susceptible to temptation. But it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? At the root of it all, when we peel back the layers, what do we see? Pride. The essence of moral licensing, the crux of hypocrisy, is that our good deeds don't cause us to further seek the good. They cause us to have an inflated sense of self. We do something good and therefore we think we are good, and there's nothing else that we need to do. The true disciple of Christ knows that this is a lie. The one seeking after God knows that the good things we do are not of our own making, but the hand of God working in us. Living with virtue has a way of implanting goodness in us, yes, but it's like a river running through a valley. If the water were to dry up, the grass would remain green for some time, but not for long. The moment we rest on our laurels, the moment we believe that we are good enough and begin to tolerate what is evil, we cut off the water. We say to God, "No, thank you, that's enough, I'm good." This is the start of hypocrisy. This is the slow, unconscious slide. My brothers and sisters, do not give in to temptation. Do not let pride diminish our drive for goodness, but let goodness drive our desire for more. When we sin along the way, do not accept that this is just a normal aspect of life. Do not grow comfortable with evil. No matter how many times you've sinned before, and even if you're likely to sin again, return to God with a humble and contrite heart with these words.
I have sinned against you, my Lord. And I would ask that your precious blood would wash and cleanse every stain until it is in the seas of God's forgetfulness.